Welcome everyone to What the Force, and welcome to an interview with my good friend and participant in What the Force, Amy Richau.
Hello!
Amy, you have produced a book of love. You were the person that wrote the book of love. Well, at least for Star Wars. It is I Love You, I Know, Lessons in Love and Friendship, I guess all based in the Star Wars universe.
Yes.
Congratulations on writing a book for Star Wars. I know that this has been kind of a dream for you for a long time. I know we've talked about it.
Yeah, well, I've certainly tweeted a lot about it, which, it's kind of a dangerous precedent maybe that if you tweet about it enough, like maybe someone will let you do it.
And be like, I've got good ideas, I swear. I can write things. Walk me through like your desire to write a book for Star Wars. I know that you used to work, of course, for Lucasfilm and their film archive section, but like where does this desire all come from? Because I know that you've been writing for .com for a while, and you've been doing other Star Wars adjacent writing, of course, with 365 Star Wars and 365 Days of Star Wars Women. But like, where did this kind of desire to contribute to the overall feeling of Star Wars come from?
I think when I kind of wanted to go back into writing, I hadn't been doing writing even since I was in college. I was a film studies major. And so it was like film history, film theory. I've always been a history geek, and I've read so many books and articles about the history of Star Wars, the making of Star Wars, learning about that. And I love those so much. And I kind of wanted to contribute to it. And, most of these, it's turning around a little bit now. I think like there are a lot of more women who are writing Star Wars books, but a lot of like the nonfiction Star Wars books, a lot of the nonfiction documentaries, like were done by men. And in a lot of cases, like sometimes, you just wonder, like, if a woman would have made this, like, would it have been different? Would different people have been profiled? Would they have focused on different narratives? What would that kind of be? And so I knew that there were a ton of women who worked at DK in a variety of roles, because I had interviewed, I think like 6 of them, maybe. They were very generous with their time, right around the end of like the original kind of 365 Star Wars women. And, and I ended up working with a different editor this time, than who I haven't had a chance to interview yet. But I really just kind of wanted to contribute to like knowing more about Star Wars, analyzing Star Wars, and exploring Star Wars history.
Yeah, when I read this book, and one of the things that I do love about it, I have like notes all over it, but is that it's like a podcast I would have done on Star Wars as a lens into, thoughts on love or analyzing kind of relationships or the kind of lessons learned from the franchise. And sometimes it's like the lessons that you wish people would take away from a scene that maybe wasn't a positive experience for some people, like Anakin and Ahsoka as an example, like walking away. Sometimes that's the best thing, as much as we wish maybe they could have stayed together as friends and mentee situation. You just can't, right? And so it's like, that's the lesson that you took away from these things.
It was interesting because a lot of people think that I pitched this book to DK, and I did not. DK deserves all the credit for they came up with the idea for the book. They approached me and they're like, they knew what the title was. They knew what the different categories of love were. Mm-hmm. I did pitch the vast majority of the pairs that were kind of in there and what the different, lessons was and what quotes would be. But it was kind of an interesting, challenging for me, because I kind of always, like, my comfort zone is reference historical analysis. And this was much more personal, and it was much more lighthearted, and, like how does Star Wars connect to you? How can you, even if you haven't seen, the show, like maybe you can like take a little like away of like a kind of a lesson. So it was a good challenge for me as a writer. And I ended up watching, obviously, you take on a project like this, you rewatch all the Star Wars movies, because that's like, you're like, oh, I got to do it for work, but I ended up I didn't have time to rewatch literally everything because I had a pretty tight deadline. But I would be like, I'm going to rewatch every single scene that has Ray and Finn. I'm going to rewatch a whole bunch of scenes where R2 and C-3PO are talking to each other, and like communicating with each other. And it was really an interesting way to revisit movies that I've seen, a quadrillion times. But it was really nice kind of, seeing it. And it's nice to see what, different relationships, people kind of pull out from it as their favorites.
Absolutely. So the categories themselves, like you said, of course, DK had come to you and said, hey, we already have this idea and the categories. And this book, I think, takes a huge team. They're actually listed out at the back of the book, which is amazing.
It is and very, very collaborative.
Yeah. Could you walk me through kind of the process that you went through when they approached you, and like anything about working on the book that, kind of like your experience with it?
Yeah. So basically they emailed me. They said, here's this, we're going to make this book. Here's the idea of it. Here's the tone of it. Here's kind of like an outline of it. Would you, we want you to write the text for it. Mm-hmm. And they asked me to come up with the pairs and the lessons and the quotes. And what was kind of interesting is that at first you thought of it as just like, I thought of it as like, I need to come up with, I think there's 25 pairs in the book and they wanted me to come up with 30. So they'd have more, so they could kind of pick and choose like the ones they wanted to end up using. And so it was really easy to come up with the pairs. Like I have a list of easily 50 pairs. I'm like desperate to like have another book because it pains me who, I didn't have room for. And they wanted it to be film heavy. They wanted it to be mostly films. They said I could do a little bit of animation. Mm-hmm. I feel like I could easily do, an entire book about Rebels and, Clone Wars. I mean, because I think that those are both very like, and I'd love to have some, resistance in, like, that would be great to have them as well. Like there just wasn't room enough for everyone, that you wanted. But if you look at the table of contents, it doesn't say the names of the pairs. It talks about the lesson. Yeah. And so what was interesting is that when I was trying to figure out like, okay, I have 50 pairs. How do I make it down to 25? And like you would come up with quotes, but sometimes your favorite quote of a pair wouldn't actually like have anything to do with the lesson that you kind of like thought of. Like it didn't really like gel, because like there were fun quotes, but like, is it like the actual, is it a quote that really lends itself to this particular book? And so I really wanted to make sure that all 11 films were represented, split between the 3 trilogies. And I, have Solo and Rogue One. And then there are a couple, Clone Wars and Rebels, but, I wanted to make sure that it was as diverse as possible.
Yeah.
And, that just becomes, you're like, okay, like a female, a female friendship, male friendship, woman, man and woman being friends, like, and then it just kind of spirals. Cause like, then you want to have like a mom and a daughter and a mom and a son and, like there's just not enough room for everything. But I really did try to have as many different kind of relationships as I could. So the first step was coming up with the pairs and the quotes, and then running that past DK. And it went through a couple of people and we went back and forth and they suggested, a couple of pairs. And then they suggested a couple of lessons that they thought would be kind of the best choice. In many cases, I actually wrote a couple different versions. And so what's in the book is kind of a mashup sometimes of a couple of them. It was really like, I would say that like every time I wrote about a pair, I had to write a couple paragraphs that were strictly reference or like an analytical deep dive. And I'm like, but that's not what like kind of get it out of my system, or just kind of like, and then you kind of condense that part into like the beginning of the paragraph. And then the rest of it kind of goes into like, how can this apply to other people's lives, or like what kind of lesson can be learned, and like, how can this connect to your life? But it was all just, done in my part was really mostly done in just a couple of weeks in the middle of summer. And then it was amazing when I would see, like out of nowhere, you'd see like a mock-up, like a PDF of like the spread. And you're like, oh my gosh, like, they're very, very quick.
This book is coming together and I just did my part like back then.
Yeah, no, but it's amazing. See, I mean, cause most of what I do is, like all the 365 stuff is on my own. And, I'm used to kind of pitching my own ideas for StarWars.com or Star Wars Insider. And it was really interesting to be asked to join a project that was kind of like already in motion and to see, you know, all of the work that went, you know, behind the scenes. And then of course it has to go through Lucasfilm.
Yeah.
Who they had already, like at that point, obviously said yes to the book, like making sure with characters, making sure everything was, you know, fine. And I wasn't involved in any of those conversations. I just kind of saw where it was at every now and then just kind of, you know, let my editor know, like if I had opinions on like things, you know.
Yeah.
And there was like a little bit of a back and forth, but yeah, I think that like to me the most challenging part was figuring out you didn't want it to be repetitive.
Yeah.
Like, and you really wanted to come up with, you know, because like, you know,
there's
like,
almost it's a
really
good
friendship. This was also a really good friendship.
Yeah, it's a good sample of different relationships across like kind of all of the media and how that like how they can kind of teach you different things from particular lens.
One, I really liked how this book had, you know, like the relationship between Han and Chewbacca was given as much weight as the relationship between Han and Leia. Like, I like that. I like that it really honored all the different kind of relationships and not just the romances or not just, you know, like the ones you know more about, but like there are smaller background characters in there. Like not all of them are human. There's some droids. There's some, you know, like Zeb is in there. And that's, you know, really, that was important to me to have, you know, all aspects of, because you want to make it Star Wars, you know, like, you have some, you know, you can't have humans. Including
like Kanan and Hera is something that like I wasn't expecting. Just because like, you know, it's not something that is necessarily the focus of the show or of the mainstream media. It's always the movies, right? But to see the animation actually come to fruition was really, really fascinating. I was actually expecting to see a Mandalorian relationship.
And that shit just wasn't covered. We couldn't cover that.
No, I mean, fair. Yeah. It was just like, it was interesting to see you pull in. And I think that we only got those relationships because you're kind of in the driver's seat as far as recommending them, because they're less of a focus for so many people, but yet they've made such a huge impact, like Zeb and Callus. Like that relationship itself. I was really happy to see. One
of the DK editors I worked with said them, and I was like, oh my gosh, I wouldn't have even pitched them because I thought they were too obscure, like for what they were looking for this book. But I was thrilled that like they let me do that one. I still can't believe they let me do, because like they kept on, you know, they wanted it to be funny, like a fun, lighthearted book, which is, you know, it's kind of funny because like most of these characters, you know, there's a lot of tragedy in Star Wars. So,
yes.
Like, but this isn't focusing on that so much. It's more focusing on kind of like, you know, a certain aspect of, you know, their relationship that you can pull from. But I was very excited when they let me do Krennic and the Death Star. I kind of threw that in there as a joke, and they were like, "Oh no, we love it." I'm like, "Oh yes," see, like that's like I think that's probably my favorite of the whole book.
I think that the like how you know it's very tongue in cheek is like the one with Luke and Vader, and it's like, remember, actions always speak louder than wheezy, distorted words. Yeah, it's very cute and very funny and very like lighthearted, as you said.
Yeah, and my editor, the main editor that I worked with was Pamela Afram, and she was extremely helpful with touches like that. Like, and really like giving me examples of like how to pull, you know, how to make it not referencey and how to make it more kind of, you know, the tongue in cheek and like the fun kind of like lightheartedness, even when you're dealing with, you know, a subject that could be, you know, construed as a little bit darker.
Yeah. So how were the categories explained to you when you were given them? Like, so we have like true love, we have family, we have friends, it's complicated, enduring love.
They were not explained whatsoever to me. Like they just gave me them, and they gave me like, I think 5 pairs that they thought would be good. But I think a couple of them didn't even end up making it in there. And so basically when I pitched, I also pitched where I thought they belonged. Some of them they had already kind of categorized, but I think a lot of them could move around. Like I think that I think the entire book could be called It's Complicated.
Yeah, it is Star Wars and it's space opera. So
and a lot of the romances in Star Wars are very complicated. Like there's, you know, like there are divorces and there are like, you know, they don't end up together.
Separations.
And like you know, unfinished business and, you know, there's all kinds of, you know, so.
Who do we know? Brea and Bail Organa. They seemed okay.
What's funny is that I think that one of my favorite kind of like, what relationship would I like in my, you know, who would I want my kids to like have, you know, when they grow up, who do I want them to have a relationship with? It would be Hera and Kanan. But like, if I was writing a book about like, can you explain to someone who doesn't know Star Wars, who Hera and Kanan was, I wouldn't actually talk so much about how they never told each other they loved each other. Like you would talk about a whole bunch of other things, but for this book, like that was a really easy and kind of fun choice because it was kind of this silly thing where like they're so great. They're like taking care of everyone, but like somehow they're not actually just communicating when they can, you know, they're superstars in every aspect and they have a really, really healthy relationship, but like for some reason they just can't get it out. And so it was, I think that, you know, different people who would have written this book could have come up with different lessons for a lot of these different characters. Like the Ahsoka Anakin one is a lesson primarily from the Clone Wars, but you could have come up with several lessons between those two in the Clone Wars, a different one for Star Wars Rebels, you know, like just depending on where they're at in their story.
Yeah. And it's because Star Wars is, you know, a very personal thing, right? Like you view it and you have your own Star Wars lens that you view things through. So if you're finding different lessons out of Star Wars or different love aspects, that's perfectly okay too, because this isn't the be all and end all of Star Wars love.
No, I was really concerned. I was like, oh, are people going to think that I friend zoned their favorites? And I was like, it's like, that definitely isn't like the point. The point of this isn't defining who these relationships are. It's just taking a little bit of their relationship and kind of, you know, injecting it into the real world. But absolutely, I hope that people, you know, however you perceive these characters is correct because it's your perception. And so like, even if like what's in this book doesn't jive exactly with like, you know, it might not be your favorite thing about it, or, you know, hopefully in many cases it is kind of like one of your favorite things, but even if it's not, you know, everyone certainly should keep their own opinions about the characters.
Well, I just love that it was a lens that I would use myself, like on this show, which I mentioned at the top of the show, is just like, you know, thinking about a lesson that Star Wars kind of teaches within the text and taking it out of its context and being like, how can I apply this to the world that I live in? Or how can I say, take that piece home with me when I'm not watching Star Wars and use it as a lens to think about my own life. And I loved that aspect of it. And also it's gorgeously created. Like it's
I'm so happy
book.
With the design of it. I think that they knocked it out of the park.
I do also love that there's a little like to from section right at the start of the book.
It's so cute.
Because
I love how tiny it is.
It's sort of meant to be a Valentine to the Star Wars lover in your life, you know, yourself, somebody else, or somebody who you're like, this is how I understand love because I've been watching it since I was, 3 years old or whatever.
It's interesting because, you know, when I interview people, I ask this a lot and people ask me a lot, like, why do you love Star Wars? Why do you think it hangs around? Like, why do you think it's so important? And when I was, writing this, I was like, I felt very, very strongly that the Tico sisters had to be in there. Felt very, very strongly that Leia and Holdo's friendship had to be in there because I really felt like those two friendships in The Last Jedi were like, I have a sister. And, and so I could relate to that, even though you didn't their bond was so strong, even though they never shared the screen. And I loved how Leia and Holdo you saw them just being girlfriends. And they could have easily been rivals, but they weren't. They chose to lift each other up. And you're like, oh, this is why I like Star Wars. Is because of all of these relationships.
And those relationships, especially women to women relationships are so rare in Star Wars just because of like the time that it was created. And, you know, now we have a lot more examples of that, like Sabine and Hera and, you know, Holdo and Leia, of course.
Yeah, and like Padme and Sabe, like would have been
exactly.
a great one too.
Yeah, like their relationship and like how much they worked together to succeed at missions and so much cool stuff. But like they're rarer. And so to focus on them a little bit more and bring them to the forefront to be like, yes, you can find your girlfriends in the Star Wars universe. And also those are very, very important too, to support each other and to lift each other up, which is the lesson of Holdo and Leia, which is awesome. I guess like, why is love so important to Star Wars, and why has it taken, how many years to talk about it kind of more heavily?
Yeah, you know, I was joking with someone that I was like, you know how there's cross-section books of vehicles? Like, you know, like every couple years, like we need a cross-section book of like relationships, you know, like, and like family trees and like chart, you know, like, I mean, like relationship, you know, like that's like kind of what, you know, I would like to see. I think that, you know, when I don't like a movie, it's usually because, like if I really don't like a movie, it's usually because like any of the characters in the story could drop dead at any minute and I wouldn't care. Like that's like kind of like, that's like literally like, do I like it? Do I not like, you know, do I care if anything bad happens to any of these people? And it usually isn't the individual character. It's because of that character's relationship to somebody. And I think that what Star Wars was so good about, you know, at first when I was coming up with the list, I was like, man, Han Solo is in this book too much and Anakin Skywalker is in this book too much. But then I kind of embraced the fact that like, what's great about Star Wars stories is that Han loves Leia. Han also loves Chewbacca. That relationship is, you know, like very good. He also like, you know, had his experiences with Kira and Lando that all kind of made him like a more interesting character and someone who you want to follow. And I think that, you know, you see that with Anakin, you see it with Leia. I certainly like, I mean, the sequel trilogy to me is just, you know, completely dominated by relationships. And so like, I could have done the entire thing just about, you know,
I think some people
basically, I feel like I could have written 10 books.
Yeah. Like
because the more you think about it, the different you know,
like there's a Han Ben one, right? Like with Kylo and like the complexity of like, I'm willing to show up for you even if I die. Like there's so much stuff there. And then also, you know, like that I love you, or, you know, dad, you know, it's
you know, it was hard because with some characters, like I felt like it was harder to include them because their stories hadn't been done, or they don't seem done, you know, like, and you're unsure about like their relationships. And so a lot of this book is really kind of,
can you elaborate on that?
Well, I think that some of the characters that like I really personally like I love like Jannah and the Rise of Skywalker, but like I feel like we've just kind of gotten to know her and like we don't know where, you know.
Yeah,
I could have written something about, you know, Jannah and Finn, but I felt like, you know, like there might be more to that story. Like I have no knowledge of, you know, any of that, but like it didn't feel like I was like that, like when you were comparing that to, you know, other relationships that are like completely done, like, cause like they were in the prequel trilogy or something like that. Like I did kind of steer towards relationships where I felt like most of the story was, had been told.
Absolutely. Why is it important to use narrative like Star Wars to talk about complex things like love?
Well, what do you mean exactly?
So like it, you know, Star Wars teaches us about love, but why is it important for people to say, you know, read about the examples in this book and use that for their own life?
Oh, I think that one of the strongest messages of love in Star Wars is the found family, kind of like you can choose who you're going to be loved. Like just because you're related to someone doesn't mean that is going to be a loving relationship. And like you can choose who you want to love, and that a friendship can be just as important as a family relationship in your life. It also just shows that relationships have ups and downs. Like, you know, you have like Jin and Galen, which is one of my favorite relationships in the book. And like, she understandably feels like it's easier for her just to pretend that her father isn't dead. But then, when you get older, sometimes you have these moments and you're like, oh my gosh, like I understand. I see my parent now, as, like as a person rather than a parent. And like, that, it's okay to open your heart to that. I think that there's a lot of like, it's okay to open your heart if you feel that connection is good, but you should also have, boundaries.
Yeah.
I mean,
like sane boundaries, of course. Right. I think what I picked up on is like using these sort of narrative examples. It's because it's drama and it's pumped up to 11. Like you said, like it's complicated all over the place. And so using them is like a hyper-focused lens to be like, yeah, this was a story, but it doesn't mean that you can't use it to say, learn that grain of truth as a lens to your own life.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, some of my favorite relationships are, Chirrut and Baze. But I also like, because like they are just bonded in such a way that like, you're like, whether or not like you think that they might be space married or not, like, I mean, they're just like, whether you think that they're a friendship, like I know fans have different, feelings about it, but like I would put their relationship and the love that they have for each other and the trust that they have each other, like against any other, group there. And I think that you could say the same thing about, like, I mean, Han and Chewie, like, they have a friendship, but it really is, like they are each other's home, like more than anything.
Yeah, absolutely. So what are some of your personal favorite examples of different kinds of love? I mean, you went into Chirrut and Baze, but like other examples that you absolutely love in Star Wars?
So Rey and Finn, I think, is probably one of my favorite Star Wars friendships. I love how they just were there for each other and they didn't make assumptions about each other. And like, they're always they're going to come back for you. They're going to like look for you and be there for you and not judge you. And so I really love their friendship. I like the lesson of, I thought that it was very relatable, the Han and Kira, because I feel like, everyone, if you get old enough, like you will love someone and they have moved on. They are, like a different person. And so it was kind of interesting to think of their relationship in, that way. Kira is really one of my favorite characters. And the other one that I initially wasn't on my list, but then kind of got added was Val and Beckett. Because I'm all, I was sad that Val wasn't in Solo more, but when I really was like rewatching Solo, I was like, Val and Beckett, like they really, really loved each other. Like they had, like for what they had, like they had a good relationship. And so it was kind of interesting to look at them as a pair and just to think like, where would, like that is a relationship that I, like, not that I think that, the lesson is obviously not sacrifice yourself, for someone. Like that is not a lesson for anyone in this book, but, but just to kind of look at, some of the different scenes and be like, wow, like, I mean, like they really did a good job of, showing the audience that like, they weren't just co-conspirators or co-criminals, like that they really, really did love each other.
Mm-hmm. So I want to go into sort of dream stories of love, and we don't necessarily need to apply characters to them, but like sort of like tropes or setups that you would love to see in Star Wars. This is a very personal imagination room. Me personally, just because I'm a mother, I would love to see a mother's nurturing relationship actually on screen, where you got to go both see mother and child on screen for a longer period of time, like a full story about them. Just because we don't really see much of that in Star Wars. There isn't a lot of mothers that actually get to hang out with their children. That could be Hera and Jason, right? Yeah. Like if we got to see more of that actually on screen and play out, etc. What are some of the things that you would love to see?
I would definitely like to see that as well. I'd like to see more like relationships like Hera and Kanan, where it's just, it's like a happy, healthy, relationship. And it, like, I think that it's nice, there's so many Star Wars stories coming out. I think that, there's not so much hyper focus on every character and every kind of, connection and relationship. And so I think that there's room to have, parents that don't die or, so quickly, and,
please.
to have like more, relationships. I'd love to see more female friendships. I always love to see female friendships. For me, like when I think about romance, like Star Wars has, fed me pretty well because I love doomed romance. And so like forbidden love, doomed romance, like that's like my jam. And so like, that I'm always like, hopefully the Obi-Wan Kenobi show will, let me know, like, let me know.
Is Satine gonna show up? Like, and then we're all just gonna cry.
No, but there should be like a new,
time.
like, there should be new people on Tatooine, like, just he should have a whole list of doomed romances. Poor Obi-Wan.
Obi-Wan.
And I also love a good love triangle. Like love triangles never get old.
Okay. Yeah.
So I would love to see like a true, I mean, really, like, I think that it would be nice to see in general more romances. And I think that, in general, just, increasing diversity, in all aspects would be great, just because ideally you want everyone who watches Star Wars to feel like they can see each other on screen. And I think Star Wars has been making some really great strides towards it, but pretty much every franchise has a lot of room to improve. So
I would love to see a live action version of Dr. Aphra. They've already done the audio drama. They've done the comic. They've had the comic, and that would give us, some amazing queer representation on screen and potentially a chance for a romance like they did in how they did it kind of as a back, memory sort of remembrance in the audio drama, which I highly recommend. It was
such a great character.
Yeah, done by Sarah Kuhn, and I highly recommend that. But actually seeing that on screen as a story or a completely different character would be, I think, really amazing for the franchise to actually have a romance that was, non-heteronormative in nature.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. Me personally, I am a sucker for they knew each other as kids. And then they went off and did their own adventures and then came back together and are adventuring and then remember that they knew each other as kids.
That's a good one. I like that. I'm here for that as well. Yes.
Yeah. I'm a big sucker for that. And so I was when I found out that Fennec was around in the Bad Batch, the little flash of her, I'm like, what if she knows Boba Fett and they were both teenagers at the same time?
That would be great.
And then there's so much chemistry for the Book of Boba Fett. I'm off in my own imagination headcanon right now, but I want even older romance. Hey, they're in their later but still kick-ass years. Let's see that. Let's see all sorts of different types of representation on screen.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what I want.
I'm with you.
So you mentioned tragic romances as your bread and butter in Star Wars.
I know.
Why are those so appealing?
I don't know. I think that I have blamed reading too much Edith Wharton novels when I was a kid is somehow that is and I think it's just kind of it's a bit of a slow burn. It's kind of the anticipation and you wanting what you can't have. And, I think your mind can just kind of go, wild. And it's just, I think that I don't know why I like it so much. You would think that I would like a happy ending, and happy endings are great. And I do think that, it'd be great to see, some people have happy endings in Star Wars.
I mean, just for a little while.
Everything goes in waves in Star Wars. And so, you can't, the conflict is never over. And so, there's never, there's the happy moments, but, it's hard to have, until you actually end the story. It's hard to have that. But Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I probably have to go to a therapist to understand why I like it so much, but I'm totally drawn to it and I think it's great and I want more of it.
She just wants the angst, folks. She's here for the angst.
I know. Well, I was like, ooh, WandaVision, like, this is tragedy. I love it. You know, like,
we don't know it's tragedy because it involves.
Seems like yeah, that's true. But it seems like
it involves magic. Right? I'm also covering WandaVision right now, so that's kind of one of the things, and I love that, like, the first tag on Disney Plus is romance, and I want a Star Wars TV show where the first tag is romance. Something very, very dramatic. I mean, this is a soap opera in space. It is, you know, about family drama, but it's also about interpersonal conflict and resolution, and leaning into that shouldn't be a problem for the storytellers. It should be something that's like, yeah, this is our bread and butter. We are drawn to this because of the relationships. As much as the pew pew is fun and the action and the adventure, it's about the reason that Luke shows up on Bespin. It's about the reason Luke shows up on Bespin, not the fact that he shows up to go and get into a lightsaber battle. He shows up because of the relationships with Han and Leia and Chewie and C-3PO. He's worried about them and he cares. And like, that's one of the most important things about Star Wars, is that it's about who you love and who you're willing to, you know, put everything on the line for.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, what's interesting is that so much of Star Wars has been so Jedi focused. And the Jedi, of course, like, you know, they don't let you love, or like they don't want, you know, connections. And so that was always like an interesting dynamic. But I think more and more stories aren't going to be as Jedi focused, or there'll be a mix. I think that there will, I mean, and ideally there will be a mix of like, and then, you know, I'm sure that there'll be more Jedi that break the rules because, you know, as people do.
And also, like, why did the rules exist, and are the rules actually required, or is that more dogmatic?
Yeah, like maybe like if you go back far enough, like that wasn't a rule and then something happened.
Yeah, which I mean, they've already started to explore a little tiny bit with the High Republic in how they talk about the relationships and what they mean. And it's like, well, you know, Claudia Gray like mentions like, what is celibacy of the heart versus celibacy of the body? But as far as like future storytelling, you know, that has been announced, what are you most looking forward to?
I'm really excited about The Acolyte.
Yeah.
And Leslie I love Headland. Like just the idea of it is like really cool. And so I look forward to, like, I'm almost kind of happy that I don't even know practically anything about it, just because it sounds really cool now. And so I'm like, let's just have it be a mystery. I love like the older I get, the more I like Obi-Wan Kenobi as a character. And I have a huge crush on Ewan McGregor, so I'm very excited about that show. But I'm also very excited about Andor, partially because I really love Cassian, and then also just because I think that that show has the ability to have so many amazing people show up in it. Mm-hmm. And I'm totally all about the connections. Like, I feel like people are all like with The Mandalorian, like people were like, I don't want that person or this person or this person or that person to show up. And I'm like, I want them all to show up. Where's Mace Windu? You know, like, I mean, I was like, I really like all the connections, the better. Like, so I kind of skew one way that way, and a lot of other people, you know, skew the other way.
What I'm most looking forward to about Cassian, and I'm excited about all the same things that you are. What I'm most looking forward to about Cassian is that it's like plugged as like a spy thriller, and to me that's just such a fascinating concept to view within Star Wars, because like there's all this sort of really interesting Star Wars technology in addition to the morally gray sort of decisions that we've already seen Cassian make in Rogue One. That to me is like super fascinating, when characters are like good but make like very questionable decisions.
Yeah, I mean, our introduction to Cassian was so dark when he like killed his, like the like informant, you know, and so but then you end up kind of like, you know, at first you're like, oh, like who is this guy? Like they seem that crossed a line, but then, you know, you end up liking that character, but you know have that knowledge in your head. You're like, what led to that? Like, what led him to that moment where he really didn't even think about it that much. Like, it was just like, he was like on autopilot of like, this is what I've got to do to get out of this situation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to see more exploration of his relationship with K2SO as well, because that is another friendship that I think is just like a really wonderful friendship. And like, how did that develop? And if we get to see kind of the beginnings of that versus, you know, what we see in Rogue One, and then like seeing where they're at when they actually get there. Yeah. I'm also looking.
That is a friendship that was on my list, which you know, ended up not, like, there was just so much Rogue One in it already that I kind of ended up taking it off, but I was like, I'm so sorry. Like,
that's okay.
But in the back of my mind, I was like, maybe there'll be an opportunity to, like, you know, since their story will continue, because that kind of was in my mind, you know, of like focusing on, you know, like trying to figure out who's in this book. Like 365 really spoiled me because that's an ongoing project. And so I'm never leaving anyone out. Yeah. And this was
you just have yet to get to them, right?
Yeah. So I'll do fanfic of a sequel of this that I'll like, you know, release.
You'll publish it on 365, the outtakes of lessons of love and friendship. I mean, I would love to see, you know, what you would have to say about Han and Ben, or, you know, what you would love to say about Sabine and Ezra, especially, you know, like there's so many relationships, because part of like the draw to the rebellion is that it's primarily built on friendships. They have nothing else. So it has to be built on this like very found family, cause driven group, whereas like the other relationships in the galaxy on the Empire side are very cold and mechanical, much like Darth Vader and the Empire itself. Just flipping to Kenobi, I'm very excited for the confrontation between Vader and Kenobi, because it's like, I hope they bring up stuff that they you know, need to work through. I actually hope that it's also very psychological and it's not actually in person. I hope it's like a weird trippy like world between worlds, or like force mind space, because I think that would be a sort of fascinating approach to dealing with conflict, that maybe they can fight in this space, and that's ends up being, but then we get a Vader that also could look like Hayden Christensen, and to me there's just such a bonus to having that happen, because it's like, can I fight my friend again for a second time?
Right. No, I know. And like, you know, I'm just thinking about like back to the book, like poor, like, you know, Obi-Wan and Satine, Obi-Wan and like, you know, Anakin, like, to me, the two saddest ones in the entire book, perhaps.
Yeah, absolutely. So what other projects are you working on right now?
So I'm continuing to do stuff with 365, a variety of, you know, different projects. I really am excited to look at women who were like female characters in Lucasfilm films, since it's the 50th anniversary. So that's kind of on my list. I'm going to continue doing character profiles and interviews with women just for the 365 Star Wars Women Project. And then just keep on, you know, pitching StarWars.com. And, you know, I've got quite a few things coming up in Star Wars Insider that I'm excited about.
I'm happy you're writing for them.
Yeah, no, it's really like, I am super, super thrilled to be writing for Insider, because it's like in-depth interviews that are like longer than, you know, can be sometimes like on, you know, the web, and, you know, just diving into some history stuff. So I have a whole bunch of pitches there. And so I have my fingers crossed that, you know, several of them work out.
All right. So because you're not afraid to tweet about your dream projects, what's your next dream project that has been yet to be confirmed, but you're like, I would really like to do X?
I think I actually have tweeted about this. I would love to write a nonfiction book related to the High Republic. And I said it before.
So I have an idea. if you actually get to do this, I have an idea. So
I tweeted about this even before I read any of the High Republic, just because I was excited about the idea. And I was so like, I like the High Republic even more than I thought. Like it really,
it's so
like
good.
really, you know, like, and I was like, oh my God, they're talking about archives, you know, like, it's like, I just want there to be like more archives and artifacts, you know, like there's plants, you know, but, you know, there's just all kinds of great stuff, in the High Republic. So I'd love to do something nonfiction wise.
So like
that.
a reference guide to the High Republic, is that what you're kind of thinking?
Yeah, or like a character guide, or, you know, really like my total dream project is to write like in-universe history books for different worlds or different eras.
Oh my God, you should write a High Republic history book.
Yeah. And, you know, the problem with that is I think that it boxes in fiction writers, which, you know, is not.
It's hard, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I would, you know, like I would love to write, you know, like,
but you could write about
the Naboo, or like the monarchs of Naboo, or
you could write about the event though that happens in the High Republic that kind of sets off the High Republic.
There have been some kind of I actually, Jason Fry just recently tweeted about, where is it? It's right here. I'm going to show it to you. I know no one else is going to see this, but he tweeted about this book, The Rebel Dossier from Rogue One, which is like an in-world, it's like info and intel on the rebellion's bravest band of spies.
Did he write that?
He did. Yeah. And I didn't even remember that it was around. And so I immediately bought it. And it's just, you know, it's like a little dossier of all the different characters, but it's written kind of from an in-world perspective. Like I love stuff like that. So I would do that for any Star Wars project.
Yeah, like because he wrote the Rose kind of reference guide that was in universe as well, and he also wrote
like
the Rey one.
There was a page one too, like which was, you know, really really like his one,
like Rey handbook is like so good, like because it's all about, it's like basically like Rey's guide to Jakku basically, and it has like drawings and like little things, and it's just so wonderful.
Yeah, as much as I love, like, I mean, I love the making of books and art of books and all the different guides and the character guides, but I really am attracted to these smaller, kind of quirkier, kind of in-world books. Like, I think that those are like super geeky in just the right way.
Yeah, like Mark Sumerak did The Secrets of the Jedi, and that's also sort of in universe, like written.
That's exactly,
like Luke's perspective while he's on Acto, and I love that book because it's like, when did he write this? A little bit of that.
There's also like the Galaxy's Edge, that's written from the perspective of like a, you know, a historian in world. Like there's a Galaxy's Edge travel guide, which is really
and even the really cookbook actually is written from the perspective of the cook. And Mark did like that part too. So yeah, there's more than enough room for that. But my request would be, I want an official character relationship chart officially from Lucasfilm. So like, you know, hey, friendship, and, you know, we're on an adventure together, and just sort of mapping out all of these characters in the High Republic, make it like a giant fold out or something that you can like take out of the book and put up on your wall. Because I did one just to get people started, and people thanked me so much because there's so many characters to remember. I just would like an official one that actually had like, you know, the Lucasfilm like stamp of approval, like this is where things started with the High Republic. Or, I
think that would be, and I imagine that someone probably is working on that probably right now. But if they're not, and if you're listening,
I would absolutely love it. Like I did my like, you know, Fanny one, but it is nice, and it's something that's done more in, say, like when The Last Jedi came out, there was a relationship chart that was released on Japan Star Wars. So like it's something that's more common in sort of like Asian dramas, etc., to like show what are all the relationships, because people want to know, hey, these people like each other, or these people are friends, or these people were on an adventure, or they hate each other. Like that's really fascinating to people, and it helps them get into the property better and quicker.
Yeah, no, I agree. I hope that is on on their list. I'm very excited that the whole next wave of, the High Republic books are coming out later this year too.
Mm-hmm.
Like after we all waited so long, and I know that, no one wanted to wait this long. That's just how it went. And I'm excited that the books are doing so well that have come out.
Yeah, no, and I've loved everything that I've read. So I've read High Republic #1 and the first 3 books that have been released. And it's like a breath of fresh air in Star Wars,
It's exciting just to kind of, there's a couple, characters that are, in the Jedi, Council who are familiar, and we really, Yoda is probably the only one that's familiar to most people. But it's great just to see such a huge variety of Jedi.
Mm-hmm.
And to get to know them. I think that was one of the great things about the Clone Wars show, is that you got to, in the prequels, you really only got to know a couple of the Jedi. Most of them were just kind of in the background, but in Clone Wars, you really got to know them better. And I feel like there's just all kinds of, promise to the High Republic. And I'm like, I was a little bit shocked when I heard that it was like 3 waves and like the first wave is like 2 years long. I was like, wow, like they really went all in on this, which is great.
Exactly. And I'm looking forward to seeing what develops between Avar and Elzar, which Charles Soule told me there was a romance in Light of the Jedi, and they think about each other way too much. So there's your tragic angst, Amy.
Oh yeah, no, I noticed.
You're like,
why do you think I liked it so much?
Why are they looking at Veracino together? That's not good. What?
No, that was right up my alley.
Well, thank you, Amy, for coming on the show and talking about your brand new books. I love you, I know, because I do.
Well, thanks for having me.
I love you.
I love you too. Like this is like fun, like I feel like, when I've been on the show before, like when we end up chatting and like, sharing our hopes and dreams, and like, it's very, very special to be able to share this with you.
Yeah, this is awesome. And I'm like one of your biggest fans in general, just to be like cheering you on and hoping that you're successful, and it's happening. And I hope that you get to write more Star Wars, the Star Wars that you're like, this is what the universe needs. And that's my hope for you, friend. And also to have you come back on the show and talk more about film influences on Star Wars, which I'm sure we will be scheduling sometime soon, to have you back on.
I hope to kind of send DK some of the nice comments that I've gotten. Like, people are really excited about, love and relationships and focusing on that. And hopefully this will just be the first of, many other books that are relationship focused.
First of many, yeah, exactly. Relationship, and also sort of that gaze on the world of Star Wars is important, and we need to represent that out there in the world. And so if you are interested in sharing some Star Wars lessons on love and friendship, give it to somebody that you love and care for, from either the galaxy far, far away or this one. So Amy, where can people find you and what you're doing online?
So my website is 365starwars.com. You can find me on Instagram at 365Star Wars. Twitter, the official one for the website is 365_Star Wars, but I'm much more active on my personal one, which is just at Amy Richau. And yeah, like hopefully, there should be some stuff at some point this year, StarWars.com, Star Wars Insider, and, cross my fingers for more.
Thank you, everyone, and you should all check out this book. Take care. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to What the Force. I'm Marie-Claire Gould, your host. Our music is orchestral music by Christy Carew for What the Force. We have a Patreon at patreon.com/whattheforce. We would like to thank all our patrons, especially those who love and are obsessed with What the Force: Brad, Cheryl Bell, Melody, Night Huntress, In Wild Space, Felicia, How Rude, Anna Perez, Macau Mom, Neil, James, Joe Allen D, Christian Luca, Josh Johnson, Scott C, and Susan. Make sure to like and subscribe on YouTube or leave a 5-star review on iTunes or other pod apps. It helps people find the show. Check out our other channel on YouTube, What the Fiction, for all sorts of other types of fiction. You can connect with us on Twitter at WT Force Show, What the Force Podcast on Facebook, or our website, where we have expanded our content to include reviews, metas, and articles, whattheforce.ca, or on our new Discord. Links are in the liner notes. Feel free to reach out and start a conversation. Cheers.